So welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series called Daily News and Shorts. In this lecture series, we cover a particular day's current affairs in a very short span of time. The idea is that you get to cover your current affairs on a daily basis, but there is a warning sign along with this, and that is that you wouldn't remember these current affairs if you do not revise them. Just watching this lecture would be job half done, because just after watching it, you have to revise it from the notes provided by us. These notes shall be shared on our Telegram channel, and the link to our Telegram channel is provided in the comment section below. So please do not forget to revise this lecture just after watching it. Otherwise, you'll quickly forget them. Okay? So with that in mind, let's begin today's lecture. But first, let's take a look at the list of topics that we shall cover today. Okay? So let's start. So daily current affairs, 2nd August, Saturday, and here is the list. So today's list is also short and crisp. We'll be only covering 3 topics because these were the only 3 news items that were of significance for us civil services aspirants. Okay, these were the only significant news items, and these are the only news items you should focus on. Ignore all the other news items, they are not relevant. Clear? Now, number 1 on this list is International Court of Justice, ICJ, on Kyoto Protocol. We have discussed this. Recently, ICJ gave a judgment on climate law, international law related to climate change, right? So it also talked about Kyoto Protocol on that. Now, what is Kyoto Protocol? We'll talk about this, okay? Second is need for better green technologies. Well, recently an article was published in the Hindu newspaper which said that the current green technologies like solar energy, wind energy, green hydrogen, these are not up to the mark. We need to have, or we need to innovate to get second generation of green technologies, because the current generation of green technologies have some problems. It won't help us fight against climate change properly. Okay, so we'll investigate this matter as well. Then the third news item is a very short one. Okay, PM National Dialysis Program. This is basically to help those people who are suffering from kidney diseases. And because people who are suffering from kidney diseases require dialysis, but dialysis is expensive. So therefore, to provide affordable healthcare to these people who can't afford dialysis, well, this scheme was launched. All right. So it's a very simple topic. Nonetheless, we'll talk about all 3 topics one by one. So let's start our discussion with topic number 1, and that is International Court of Justice, ICJ, on Kyoto Protocol. Now, we have discussed this before, okay? Like 2 or 3 lectures back, we talked about an important advisory opinion given by International Court of Justice when it comes to climate change, international law related to climate change, right? Within that, they also talked about, International Court of Justice also talked about Kyoto Protocol, because Kyoto Protocol is also an important international law with respect to climate change. It is an important international climate change law, right? Now, many people thought that Kyoto Protocol would discontinue, but ICJ made it clear that Kyoto Protocol is still up and running, and you can sue countries under Kyoto Protocol if they do not fulfill their obligations under Kyoto Protocol. Clear? Basically, through this opinion, ICJ has revived Kyoto Protocol. Now, the important question for us is, what is Kyoto Protocol? Okay, so let's talk about this, and then we'll talk about the significance of this judgment given by International Court of Justice. Clear? So first, let's talk about Kyoto Protocol. Okay, now you see, when it comes to climate change, okay, climate change basically impacts the entire world. Okay, it is a global problem. It is not a problem of one particular country or a group of countries. It's a global problem. Therefore, everyone needs to come together to fight against it, because the consequences of this problem would be faced by every country. Now, the question is, whose responsibility is it to fight against climate change? Generally, it is said that we all should come together to fight against climate change, but some countries have bigger responsibility than other countries. Okay, I'll explain this. Okay, don't get confused. So the entire world is divided into 2 categories, okay, developed countries and developing countries, right? Now, it is generally said that climate change has happened because of global warming and because of carbon emissions, right? carbon emissions since the Industrial Revolution. The thing is that developed countries industrialized earlier. They had set up factories earlier because they are developed today. So definitely Industrial Revolution came to them earlier. So they have been emitting carbon for quite some time. Developing countries have just started emitting carbon. They are getting industrialized right now. Developed countries are fully industrialized. They started this industrialization process way back. Now, during this industrialization process, they have emitted a lot of carbon. Okay, developing countries have just started to emit carbon. Therefore, climate change or global warming that is happening now is more because of the carbon emissions done by developed countries, historical carbon emissions done by developed countries. Now, developed countries have historically emitted more carbon, and because of that, global warming is happening. That is why developed countries have a bigger responsibility to fight against climate change. Okay? Because developed countries are more responsible for climate change, you can't ask developing countries to stop carbon emissions. They would say that we have just now started to develop. We have just now started to set up factories. And now you're saying our factories cannot run properly because they are emitting carbon. That's unfair. You got developed. You polluted the environment when it was your time. Now, when it is our time, you're stopping us. Therefore, you have a bigger responsibility. Developed countries have a bigger responsibility of reducing carbon emissions than developing countries because they have historically emitted a lot of carbon. Yes, therefore, well, it was generally believed back in 1990s that, well, climate change is a common responsibility of all, but developed countries have higher responsibility. Therefore, they have to cut emissions more than developing countries. They have to reduce their carbon emissions more than developing countries. This principle was agreed to, and this principle is known as common, remember this, but differentiated responsibility. Okay, common but differentiated responsibilities, CBDR. Climate change is a common responsibility, but this responsibility varies between developed and developing countries. Developed have more, developing have less. It is a common responsibility, but some have more, some have less. You understand? This principle is known as common but differentiated responsibility. And based on this principle, Kyoto Protocol was launched in 1997. Now, what was Kyoto Protocol? Listen to me carefully, okay? So, what was Kyoto Protocol? So, it was an agreement signed by almost 192 countries, okay? In 1997 in Kyoto, Japan. That is why it is known as Kyoto Protocol. Now, this agreement was under United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So, it was adopted in 1997, but it came into force in 2005. Clear? So, Kyoto Protocol was agreed to by all countries. It was based on common but differentiated responsibility principle. Now, how does this principle play out? The thing is, well, a list of developed countries was made. Okay, that list contained 37 countries. So, 37 countries were called industrialized world, industrialized countries. And binding carbon emission reduction targets were put on these 37 countries. So, these 37 countries were given targets to reduce carbon emissions. Okay, and these targets were binding in nature. Okay, no targets were given to developing countries, but binding targets were given to developed countries. Now you understand common but differentiated responsibilities. Okay, so binding emission reduction targets for 37 industrialized nations was given. Okay, it was based on the principle of common but differentiated responsibility, and RC over here stands for respective capabilities. Because developed countries have more money, more technology to reduce carbon emissions than developing countries. That is why their respective capabilities are also more. So CBDR, RC. Clear? They were given binding targets to reduce carbon. But Well, it is a difficult task to reduce carbon. Therefore, some flexibility was provided to them. Like what flexibilities? Carbon credit mechanism. Under this, if any other country reduces carbon emissions, then it will get a carbon credit. It can sell that carbon credit to any other country who has exceeded its target. You understand the carbon trading mechanism, right? So this was there. Then clean development mechanism, CDM. If a developed country is not able to reduce carbon, but it helps a developing country to reduce carbon emissions by providing it finance and technology, then too we'll consider that you have achieved your target. Okay, so if you're not able to reduce your carbon emissions yourself, but you helped other countries to reduce the carbon emissions, we'll consider that you have achieved your targets, right? And joint projects between countries to achieve carbon emission reduction targets. So these flexibilities were provided under Kyoto Protocol. Clear? But the catch is, Kyoto Protocol, well, it was discontinued and it was not implemented properly. It had two implementation periods. Okay, one was between 2008 to 2012 and the other was 2012 to 2020. After that, it was discontinued. Okay, why? Why was this Kyoto Protocol not working? Why it became obsolete? First of all, in 2015, Paris Agreement came into being. Okay, and under Paris Agreement, well, all countries have to pitch in, right? Therefore, people thought that after 2020, Paris Agreement would be implemented and Kyoto Protocol has become obsolete. So because of Paris Agreement, people's attention switched to Paris Agreement and Kyoto Protocol was left out. Then the USA factor. USA refused to follow Kyoto Protocol and USA is the biggest country. When it refuses to basically implement an agreement, well, it doesn't set a good example and that agreement, well, it falters. So USA factor was big. Plus, under Kyoto Protocol, only two commitment periods were given, 2008 to 2012, 2012 to 2020. Nobody extended it beyond 2020, no third commitment period. So everyone thought that, well, it is done and dusted, right? But recently, ICJ has said that no, it is not done and dusted and it is still continuing. So those binding emissions target on 37 industrialized nations are still there. Even though Paris Agreement is going on, those targets are still there. This is the significance of ICJ's judgment. Clear? Now the thing is that Kyoto Protocol, even though ICJ has said that it is going to continue, Kyoto Protocol still suffers from various challenges and that is why it has not been implemented properly. Now what are those challenges? First of all, US non-ratification. Like I said, when USA refuses an agreement, well, that agreement loses teeth because USA is the biggest country on the block. It is the superpower. It is the biggest country, right? What it does, what it says matters. So this was the reason. Plus, Kyoto Protocol had one more problem. There was no enforcement mechanism. Yes, industrialized countries were given binding targets, but if they don't achieve those binding targets, there was no penalty for them, right? So many countries like Canada, Japan started ignoring their targets. And when they started ignoring their targets, you couldn't do anything about that. So there was no penalty, no punishment for violating your targets. So that is why countries stopped following those targets, right? So this was there. Plus, because of US-China geopolitical rivalry, well, USA doesn't want to follow Kyoto Protocol because they think that China is emitting carbon, so we should be allowed to emit carbon. So because of this geopolitical rivalry, there is no consensus on climate change. This is a big problem. Nonetheless, this ICJ judgment is significant. Why? What is the significance? Number one, well, Kyoto Protocol continues. This is what ICJ has said. So everyone is now clear that Kyoto Protocol still continues. Second, now ICJ has made it clear that it is a binding obligation of industrialized nations to basically implement their targets. So if they don't, you can file cases against them in International Court of Justice. So climate change litigation gets expanded. Now you can file cases against them that they are not fulfilling their obligations. Clear? And the third is, well, Paris Agreement did not care about this principle, CBDR principle, right? Kyoto Protocol did, but Kyoto Protocol was discontinued. Paris Agreement continued. So this principle was ignored. Now it, well, continues. So it is basically a revival of this principle called CBDR, which is a good thing for developing countries, good thing for India, right? So this is the significance. The significance, the points related to significance of ICJ judgment are given in your notes in a detailed manner. Go through that, okay? Revise your notes. All right. Now let's quickly shift our focus to second news item, and that is need for better green technology. Now what is this? You see, again, we'll continue with climate change. So climate change is a reality. Now to fight against climate change, we are shifting to green technologies. For example, instead of burning fossil fuels for electricity, we are now producing electricity through solar, wind, right? Instead of burning fossil fuels in cars, in vehicles, we are now using electric vehicles, right? And electricity is now being produced through solar and wind. So carbon emissions get reduced, right? And India is basically a champion in this area, which I'm about to talk about. Instead of burning fossil fuels, people are now saying that you burn hydrogen. By burning hydrogen, you produce energy and there is no carbon that is emitted. Only water is emitted, which is useful. So replace fossil fuels with hydrogen, right? So these alternatives are being implemented and suggested side by side, and this is known as the green transition, because these green technologies are being used to fight against climate change, right? But this article was published in the Hindu newspaper, which said that these green technologies are not working properly, or they have some issues, right? These green technologies have some issues, and therefore we need to innovate more. We need to create a second generation of green technologies to truly fight against climate change. Okay. Now, what issues are there with the present batch of green technologies? Let's talk about this. Okay. So, need for better green technologies. So, what are the current issues with green technologies right now? First of all, let's talk about solar. Okay. Now, solar energy is produced by solar panels which capture sunlight and produce electricity. Now, in those solar panels, we use silicon photovoltaic cells. The problem with silicon photovoltaic cells is that its efficiency is 15 to 18%. That means if you capture solar energy, right, you are only able to convert 15% of that solar energy into electricity. That is what we mean by what? Efficiency. So this solar panel captures a lot of solar energy but only converts 15% of that into electricity. If its efficiency was more, it would have produced, let's suppose if its efficiency was 50%, then from the given sunlight, it would have produced more electricity, right? So silicon photovoltaics have lower efficiency, because of which we need more solar panels, because electricity demand is rising. So we need more solar panels, we need bigger solar parks, we need bigger land, right? We need more land for these solar panels, solar parks. And that is the problem, because land is scarce. There is land scarcity, okay? Because urban expansion is happening, population is rising, agriculture is expanding, plus you also are expanding your forest area. There is not much land that is available, especially in a population dense country like India, right? There is not much land available. So there is land scarcity. And if you require so much land for solar energy, well, that creates a problem. So need of the hour is to increase the efficiency of these silicon photovoltaics so that you can produce more electricity with less solar panels, less land, and that would be better. So the next generation of solar panels should have higher efficiency. Otherwise, well, there will be constant competition between urban areas, agriculture, forest areas with solar parks. This is a huge problem. We need to innovate. Clear? Next is hydrogen. Okay. Now the thing is, remember, we currently produce energy by burning fossil fuels. Now burning fossil fuels, what does it do? It produces energy, no doubt, but it also emits a lot of polluting gases and carbon dioxide, which causes global warming. Now, instead of burning fossil fuels, you should burn hydrogen, because hydrogen produces energy like fossil fuels. But the best part is, it also releases byproducts, but that byproduct is water, which is good. We'll get fresh water, more fresh water, right? So we are trying to replace fossil fuels with hydrogen. But for that, we need to be able to produce hydrogen, right? Now, how do you produce hydrogen? There are two ways. One way is you produce hydrogen through natural gas. Okay? Natural gas. Natural gas is also a fossil fuel, by the way. But you produce hydrogen through natural gas. The problem with producing hydrogen through natural gas is that it emits a lot of greenhouse gases. So you are producing hydrogen to reduce greenhouse gases, but the production process itself is emitting greenhouse gases. So it is counterproductive, right? The hydrogen that is produced from natural gas is known as grey hydrogen. There is another method of producing hydrogen, okay, and that is by electrolysis of water, electrolysis of H2O. Okay, so you electrolyze water, hydrogen gets separated, oxygen gets separated, and you get this hydrogen. This type of hydrogen, which is produced by electrolysis of water, is known as green hydrogen. The best part about this is that it doesn't emit any greenhouse gases. So the production process of hydrogen doesn't produce any greenhouse gases. Hydrogen usage will not produce any greenhouse gases. Win-win situation. The problem with grey hydrogen was that yes, hydrogen produced will reduce greenhouse gases, but the production process itself was emitting greenhouse gases. Therefore, entire world is searching for green hydrogen. Clear? But yes, green hydrogen is the best alternative for fossil fuels. That is given. That is true. And Indian government is also investing a lot of money for producing green hydrogen. The problem with green hydrogen is that green hydrogen is produced through electrolysis of water, right? This electrolysis of water requires a lot of energy. Therefore, when it requires a lot of energy, it requires a lot of cost also. So it is very expensive to produce green hydrogen. And if it is very expensive to produce green hydrogen, then it will not be economically viable. And when it won't be economically viable, why would people replace it with fossil fuels? Because fossil fuels are cheap. Why would people buy green hydrogen if it's very expensive? They won't, right? You need economics also. You need viable, sustainable economics also. So you need to innovate to produce green hydrogen, okay, in a very low cost, so that people readily replace it with fossil fuels, or people readily replace fossil fuels with it. So this is one problem. Cost and energy intensity is one problem. The other problem is that of hydrogen itself. Hydrogen is basically the lightest. It is colorless, odorless, and it is inflammable. So the storage and transportation of hydrogen is very difficult. If there is a leak from a storage site, you won't be able to detect it because hydrogen gas is colorless and odorless. You won't be able to detect the leak. Plus it is inflammable. So it catches fire very quickly. Very dangerous for areas. Okay, very dangerous as far as accidents are concerned. So storage and transportation also requires a lot of money. So this is the problem with green hydrogen. The overall thing is, people are saying that, well, you have invested so much on solar energy, wind energy, green hydrogen, yet greenhouse gas emissions, CO2 levels are rising. So what are you doing? You're investing record numbers in these green technologies, yet you are not able to reduce carbon. There is some problem, so you need to innovate. You need second generation of green technologies. Okay. Now, what are the challenges in this innovation? If everyone knows that we need to innovate, we need to get second generation of green technologies, why aren't people doing it? Because it is difficult. It's not that easy. What challenges are there? Okay, challenges in tech upgradation. First of all, high research and development cost. Plus, these projects require a lot of time, long gestation periods. Plus, for solar technology, India depends on China. There is over dependence on China. In fact, 80% of the components of solar panels we import from China. Now, that is a big vulnerability. Okay. Then, this emerging technologies, these new second generation of technologies that are coming out, they have not been tested in the natural world. They have not been tested on a broad scale. So, we need good testing and validation of this technology. And because these green technologies are expensive, right? Private sector is also hesitant in investing in them because private sector works for profit. If there is no profit, private sector won't invest or participate in that. Currently, these businesses are not profitable because they are very costly. So, private sector is not bringing in the required investment. So, these challenges exist. Okay, government has to do something about it. Clear? And our last topic is PM National Dialysis Program. Now, it is very simple. Okay, what is dialysis? Basically, the thing is that, well, what do your kidneys do? Kidneys purify your blood. Okay, your blood has a lot of toxins. So, kidneys purify that. Okay, remove all the toxins from your blood and then you excrete those toxins through urine. Okay, that's the job of kidneys. But some people suffer from renal failures. Their kidney is not working. Okay. Now they need to purify their blood. Otherwise, how would they stay alive? Their blood would become toxic, more and more toxic, and they won't be able to survive. But their kidneys are not working. Therefore, they need to artificially purify their blood. So what happens? There is a machine called dialysis machine. Okay, hemodialysis machine. This is basically an artificial kidney. So what happens is people whose kidneys are not working, they go to the hospital. Okay, blood is taken out. Their entire body's blood is taken out, put into this machine. This machine purifies it and then puts this blood back into them. Right? Whatever the kidneys are doing, this artificial machine does that. Right? It takes around 4 hours. This is dialysis. And most kidney patients have to go for dialysis once, twice, or even thrice a week. Okay? And it takes 4 to 5 hours for one sitting. So it's a very difficult thing. Okay, but this happens. Now the thing is that this dialysis process is very expensive. So poor people can't afford it. Therefore, government launched PM National Dialysis Program. Under PM National Dialysis Program, well, government will try to provide these dialysis machines or dialysis services at an affordable cost. Clear? That's what PM National Dialysis Program is all about. So let's talk about it very briefly. Clear? So it was launched in 2016. Okay. Under this, basically what will happen that, well, the government has created a PM National Dialysis Program portal. Okay. All you have to do is log into this portal with your Abha ID. What is Abha ID? Ayushman Bharat Health Account. All your medical history, everything will be uploaded on this portal. Okay. Then this portal contains all those areas where all those hospitals where dialysis services are provided. So you can search for your nearest dialysis center and choose it and book an appointment on this portal. And you don't have to pay much. Right? This is what is being done under this. Clear? So it is being implemented in all states in India. The idea is that BPL families who cannot afford dialysis service, they are provided affordable healthcare. Clear? That's about it. That's all you need to know. Though some more information about this program is also there, but that is mentioned in your notes, but that is very easy to understand. You just have to read it. So I'm not going to waste time in discussing that. Just read it from your notes. All right? That would be all. And with that, we conclude today's session. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. But please do not forget to revise this lecture. Revision is extremely important. Otherwise, you'll forget these current affairs. So revise them from the notes. And I shall see you next time with another set of news items. Thank you, everyone.